Right, so we're going to do a little bit of work on hemming an entire circle. Now, it is quite unusual that you would ever need to hem an entire circle unless you're doing something like a circle skirt, which means that you have to hem on that bias. However, you do occasionally get some very sharp bends in sewing that require you to hem around, particularly around armholes and things like that. So I'm going to teach you a couple of tricks on how to get this beautifully sewn so you don't have any racking going on. So for those who don't know what racking is, if you were to sew around a curve, because there is more fabric on the outside than there is at the point you need to hem, what you have is excess, and if that excess isn't managed properly, it drags the fabric and you end up with sort of diagonal pleats almost in your hem. And I bet if you were to go and look in your wardrobe, you would see good examples of racking all over the place. It's very common in shop bought clothing. So I'm going to teach you how to sew around a circle with no racking and actually reasonably quickly. First thing we're going to do is we're going to establish our seam allowance. So I think we're going to do a 5/8 or 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is run a stay stitch all the way around at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and that is to be the anchor, to be part of the anchor stitch, so that I have something to support the folding. The second stitch I'm going to do is a gathering stitch, and a gathering stitch, a basting stitch, a stay stitch. They're all exactly the same settings on your machine. It's the longest running stitch that you've got, but I'm going to do a gathering stitch inside the seam allowance, probably about 7mm, so halfway between the anchor stitch and the raw edge. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to show you what we need to do next. Right, so I have got the stay stitch on the inside, and I've got a gathering stitch on the in between that seam allowance. So what I haven't done with this gathering stitch is done a reverse at the beginning and the end. I need both tail threads that have come from the top of the sewing machine in order for me to create this lovely gathered hem effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the tail thread and I'm going to gently start gathering this fabric. Okay, now I will tell you, you don't actually need a huge amount of gathering to create quite a nice effect. Okay, but what you should be able to see, hopefully, is that everything's starting to curl upwards. So I'm now going to come from the other side, a little bit of gather in that, and take that all the way around to the bottom. Okay, and you can see that this actually now starts to, it wants to curl upwards. So this is where your stay stitch now takes effect. So I'm going to go I'm going to start the opposite side to where I have finished off that stay stitch and that gathering stitch, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pressing this hem under. Okay, and what I will want to do is I will want to push out any excess gathering to these edges. So if I started there and moved all the way around but there was excess, then it will have to stay there, and that's not really the look we're going for. So I'm going to just give that a little press, and then I will work my way around, pushing any excess gathering out of the way. It's quite a lengthy process, but it is a lot quicker than trying to iron a double hem without this assistance. So I'll go off and do that, I'll show you the result. Right, so this has now been pressed, and I've pressed that raw edge under as well, and it's sitting quite nicely actually. There are little bits that might be a little bit tricky, but we'll manage that at the sewing machine. But I've clipped them using quilter's clips just because I think it's slightly easier than pinning around this sort of gradient of curve. And all we've got left to do is now stitch this on using your standard stitch length. So I have sewn this together. I've used a standard stitch length to do that. It's looking fantastic. It's completely circular, and there is not a piece of racking in sight. I've removed the stay stitch and the gathering stitch, and you wouldn't even know that they were there, and that is how you sew a completely circular hem.